If you'd like to, please subscribe. It helps me out a lot. I post every Wednesday. Hey everyone, my name is Catherine and welcome to my channel. Today I wanted to do a travel related video still, but with a book and reading twist. So I really love to read and I'm really glad that I've gotten back into reading in the last couple of years. And when I travel, I try to find books that either are just generally travel related or with travel themes, or I try to read a book that is set in that part of the world. And I wanted to go over some books that I've read over the last couple of years that I've really enjoyed while traveling, and also the books that I am planning on reading because I'm about to embark on a 6-week trip to South America and Antarctica. And I thought I would also share the books that I am wanting to read while I'm there. So to start out with that, I'm more specifically going to Argentina and Chile, and I'm going to be going to like Santiago, Chile, Buenos Aires, Argentina, and then also doing Patagonia. And I honestly have been having a hard time finding books that are specifically set in those countries or that region of the world. If I do find something, it is like a book that's set in a different country in South America, or it's a book that's set in Mexico. So I can't quite find something that directly relates to it. So that is why I'm going to be just doing general reads of travel related books and also books that I've just been wanting to read for a while. So I don't have like incredible book recommendations for that part of the world. The first book that I'm wanting to read is a book called Book of Two Ways by Jodi Picoult, which I think I'm saying her last name right. I see her on TikTok and she made one specifically on how to pronounce her last name. She's written a lot of really well-known books like My Sister's Keeper or Wish You Were Here, which I also recommend that book for travel. And the Book of Two Ways, it's been out for a couple of years, but I want to read it because the premise of the book is that there's this woman and she is flying on a plane and the plane starts to have issues and go down. And when you're in kind of a life or death situation and your life kind of flashes before your eyes, you have certain things that you think about. And she, what it sounds like in this book, is like married or with someone, but she doesn't think about him. She thinks about her long lost love from years prior. It just kind of makes her realize like what she really wants in life. So it's like a romance book related a bit to travel because she's on a plane and that's when she realizes all of this. I'm a little crazy because I'm wanting to read this on my flight and it's about a flight that's like going down, and especially with everything that's been going on in 2024. But I've done it before and I'll go over some of those books. But books that are generally about flying are fun to read while traveling. So that's going to be my first book. I'm also, this is unrelated, but since I'm talking about books, I'm wanting to read Bride by Ali Hazelwood that comes out in early February. Not travel related, but that's just what I'm going to be reading. And I've been hearing a lot about Divine Arrivals, and it's on Kindle Unlimited, and I'm only bringing my Kindle while traveling. That is a tip. If you're traveling and you don't want to pack a lot of books, like getting a Kindle can be so worth it if you're traveling a lot. I really do love reading it. You can turn up the brightness. It's very small and compact, and it's just like a travel necessity. And then I did actually find a book that is related to Antarctica. It's called Antarctica and it's by Amy McCulloch, McCulloch. I don't think I said that right. I'm also looking down because I wrote all of this on my phone in my notes app. It's a thriller, and my favorite genres to read are contemporary romance and then thriller. There's this woman and her partner is like, he's into like really esteemed like art sales and people that buy really expensive paintings, and I guess there's like an art sale or something that brings them to a cruise in Antarctica, and so she goes with him because of his job. Then there's like a murder or something that happens on the cruise in Antarctica, and I'm going to be taking a cruise, so I want to read that while on my cruise. It's always hard to know with travel how much time you'll have to read. Like maybe there will be a lot of downtime because you're flying, or at night in the hotel, or other modes of transportation, or lots of waiting around, or you're busy traveling or too exhausted to read. So it could go either way, but I think for Antarctica I should be good because it's on a boat. I'm not going to be going from city to city and having to unpack and repack, and while you're like traveling across the Drake Passage or whatever, there will be downtime. So I'm excited to read that for sure. And then other just general travel related books. If you're brave and you want to read this on the plane like I did, like I mentioned earlier, the book Hostage by Claire McIntosh. I really liked that book. And for some reason, because the issue that goes on is the people on the plane like take the plane hostage, it's not like a mechanical error that makes the plane go down. For whatever reason, that made me feel better about reading it on a plane. I don't know why. The reason why they're taken hostage is just very interesting. I won't say anything more to spoil it, but I liked that book. It was a lot of fun. And again, the thriller is my second favorite genre, although honestly sometimes it might even be my first. It really goes back and forth. Right now I'm reading None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell, not travel related at all, but I've been really into that book. I started it 2 days ago and I woke up thinking about it, and I've been thinking about it throughout the day, and it's been a while since a book has done that to me, not gonna lie. But another type of book I like to read is like airport-based romance books. I love when like people meet each other at the airport or something like that. And one that I have, if it's around Christmas time or you're okay reading a Christmas book not during Christmas time, there's Holiday Romance, or also there's Haven't Met You Yet. So I like those contemporary romance books that's based on airports. And then another book that I read a while ago, but I thought was kind of funny. It has mixed reviews, but it is called What I Was Doing While You Were Breeding, which is such a funny title. So if you're somebody that's in your travel era, you're not wanting a family, or like that's not on your horizon, but then you see like on Facebook everyone around you is like starting families and having kids, and that's just like not where you are in life, I definitely recommend this book. It's more like a memoir style, and yeah, it's just a really interesting book and a nice perspective to see like somebody who's traveling, like a young adult traveling and living out her dreams, and she has some interesting and wild stories. Another type of book that I recommend is like a historical nonfiction or fiction book that's based on the part of the world that you're going to. And if I was to sit here and go through every part of the world and recommend books, I would be here for a long time. And some parts of the world are easier than others. Like I said, for Argentina and Chile, I'm having a hard time finding books for that part of the world. So if you have recommendations, let me know. But last year when I went to like Kenya or Korea or Japan, like that was a lot easier to find books on that part of the world. In general, for historical fiction, I think one of my favorite authors is Kristen Hanna, and she writes some really cool, really amazing books, and I still have a lot of them to read, but the ones that I have read were really, really good, and they generally get a lot of praise and people love them. Another book I really like is Disappearing Earth by Julia Phillips, and this is in the Kamchatka region of Russia. Because my family's Russian, I love to read books in that part of the world. And Kamchatka, actually there's a map behind me, but it is like, if my head's even covering it, it is like the far eastern part of Russia, so the complete other side away from Europe. And there's a peninsula called Kamchatka, and it is about like two girls that are just like after school or whatever out and about walking by themselves, and the man approaches them and asks them to help him to his car because he's injured, and then they go missing. And it's in the Kamchatka region, and they're so confused about how they just disappear because it's like a remote peninsula, and their only way for him to go and get away from that area is to go up north. And there's been no one that's gone up north. They're just shocked how he could have gotten away with it. So if you're interested in Russia and like thrillers, I definitely recommend that book. I really liked it. And then if you're wanting something that's more nautical or ship related, Love Lists and Fancy Ships, and then the sequel, Luck and Last Resorts by Sarah Grinder-Roods, if I'm saying that right. That is a fun book where this girl, she works on a yacht, and then the second book is about her best friend who she met on that yacht also working there, then her love life, and it's set kind of around like the Florida, Miami area. So I really liked those books. I'm just going to briefly name a couple of other books because again, I have kind of a long list. The People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. That's a fun romance book that's related to people being on vacation. Then there's The Honeymooners by Christina Lauren. They're actually an author duo, and they're one of my favorites to read for like romance books. And then Jodi Picoult, who I mentioned earlier, she wrote Wish You Were Here. If you're going to the Galapagos, I recommend reading that book because it is set in the Galapagos, but it is a like COVID pandemic centered book. So if that's triggering still, then I wouldn't recommend it. But it has to do with the Galapagos, and I wish I had waited to read it until I went to the Galapagos, because I did in 2022, but I read it when it first came out. I also read Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. And that's set, it's like a researcher, and it has to do with like climate change, and it's a bit of a sad book, but it has really good ratings. It's really good, and it's set in more like the Greenland area, so recommend that one. If you're wanting something that's more non-fiction, then I really like the Prisoners of Geography series by Tim Marshall. He has like multiple books out. The first 1 or 2 books, it just goes like Africa, Europe, Russia, like it breaks down big parts of the world. I learned a lot, honestly, and it just the way it's divided, it's just easy to read and digest, and I really did like the books. His more recent books goes into like space, so he's starting to really branch out, but that's a cool and interesting like book series and author to get into if you're wanting to specifically learn more about geography. I also like to read memoirs a lot, and this one person, she is Naomi Park. If you've heard of her, she's gone pretty like well known on the internet. She's written 2 books about her experience escaping North Korea. The first one is more about her living and escaping North Korea, and it's really sad but so interesting. I like read that book so fast. And then the second one is more about her experience living in the United States and also comparing it to North Korea, and that there's more connections from the US to North Korea than you might think. It's really interesting. It gets a bit more political than I expected, and I was a bit surprised on her views, but it's still an interesting read from a really unique perspective. One of my honestly like favorite books is Border Crossings: A Journey on the Trans-Siberian Railway, and I like to call this like an adult picture book. It is so beautiful. This couple, they went across the Trans-Siberian Railway, where it's like from Vladivostok to Moscow, across all of Russia, or the other way around, and you could also go into China, I think, too. And you can take the longest railway in the world and make stops or whatnot, and I really want to do that. I don't know now if like the political climate when that could happen, but that's still one of my top like travel musts that I want to do. And she did it, and then was able to make this beautifully illustrated book on her experience going across Russia, and I absolutely loved it. I went through it pretty fast because there's a lot of pictures and not as much text as like a normal book, but it's definitely not like a children's book. Not that children can't read it, you can just tell it's more aimed towards adults. And she's also done some other illustrated books as well, such as one in Serbia, which I need to get around to reading, but I really do love her books. I kind of want to see if there's anything new, honestly, because I read that a while ago. I also specifically love to read historical fiction set in East Asia. I'm just really interested in that part of the world. So Peach Blossom Spring is centered around like a son and mom duo, and it like starts out as like the son being young with the mom, and then it goes and jumps ahead to then the son being in the US with his own family down the line. But the son and mom, they escape a certain part of China where there's just not a good situation going on, and yeah, and it's just like a story about immigration. So much can happen within like 1 or 2 generations, and it's just, I'm trying to really briefly explain it, but it's very interesting. One of my favorite books that I read in 2022 was Pachinko, and it actually was adapted later on into a TV series on Apple TV. And I loved that book. It is about a girl. She grows up in Korea, and then she basically gets pregnant out of wedlock. She's young, and at that time, because this was like a long time ago that this happened, she's basically discarded, and then she ends up going to Japan, and it's just like a story of survival. And you also learn a lot about Korea, because this is before Korea became North and South Korea. It was just one Korea, so you learn a lot about Korea and Japan and the tensions that they had and just the history of those 2 countries, which I found to be very fascinating. And then also it's another story that just talks about like different generations, because you also get to learn more about like her children and her family down the line. So I just found it again to be very, very good. And then the last book I wanted to talk about is Jana Goes Wild. This is a romance book that's set in East Africa, and this is what I actually listened to, because I do love audiobooks as well. I listened to it while in Kenya. It's technically set in Tanzania, but Tanzania borders Kenya, and I thought this worked like good enough. But it's just like a classic like contemporary romance book. This woman goes out to Tanzania for a wedding, and then there's some, you know, romance that happens, blah blah blah. But I really liked it, and I loved to listen to it when I was out there. So that is kind of like a brief overview of like books that I'm planning on reading on my upcoming trip, but also like I'm asking if you have any recommendations for books for Chile or Argentina or like South America in general. I'd love to hear. That has been a little book video, travel related book video. So I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, let me know if you want to see anything else from me. Let me know what you're reading, if you're into reading, and yeah, thank you all so much, and I hope to see you in a future video of mine.